do here on Skiba News Nation. Please like and subscribe, and also share with others so that we can grow the biggest truth-seeking community on the internet. Huge shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this show without you, so I just wanted to say thank you. And if you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation.
What it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you can respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
Charlie. Don't mess with our cats. Hey, Skiba News Nation family. Welcome to episode 99 of Skiba News Nation, your weekly source of the latest news, controversial topics, conspiracies, forgotten history, and so much more. I'm your host, Jeremiah Skiba, and today we'll be talking about another Trump assassination attempt. Arrested for being a conservative Christian, Justice Department turns into a political weapon. Taylor Swift is not a psyop, or is she? Ukraine drones causing earthquakes in Russia. Something doesn't seem right with Kackala Harris's rallies. Social media manipulation, an all-new Opa's Corner, and for History's Mysteries, we'll be talking about Disneyland, the dark side of the happiest place on earth, Norm Macdonald on 9/11, memes, and much more, so subscribe and stay tuned. As always, I'd like to introduce my great and insightful co-host, Mr. Jake Grant. Welcome, Jake. What's up?
Hey, Jeremiah. Great to be back. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Luckily, no Haitians have tried to come and steal our cats, so that's good. I have a sign in the front yard that says, we believe in the Second Amendment. So,
oh, man.
Gotta protect your pets.
Hey, you gotta protect Charlie. Gotta protect him, man.
He's the true star of the show. He'll be back. He just had to take a break. So he's in the sensory room or whatever they call it. Anyways, you got some good current news for me today?
Yes, I do. But hey, before we hit the news segment, I wanted to let everybody know that this Friday evening you're going to be able to check out my tribethegame.net website for our board game. We're going to be able to get the big Tribe Total Eclipse First Edition orders picked up here early October and sent off to everybody who supported the Kickstarter. And now everybody can see some cool new pictures and maybe pre-order the game if they missed the Kickstarter. So that's tribethegame.net. Check it out.
Sweet, man. And maybe you can talk more about it on the Discord on Friday.
Oh, yeah, that would be cool.
So if you guys haven't already joined our Discord, join our Discord. Anyways, you got some great current news for me?
Here we go. Yes, we do.
All right, let's go.
First, I want to start us off with a hilarious argument as to why it is dangerous to sleep in your sleeping bag. So check this little clip out here. Let's just watch it one more time for good measure, right?
You know, that same thing has happened to me before.
Awesome. So, if you didn't know, it's very, very dangerous to sleep in a sleeping bag in Bigfoot-infested territories. Well, I want to start off lighthearted because I'm going to be covering some pretty serious tones. The systematic targeting of demographics and people being listed and labeled as threats to society who actually have wholesome beliefs being targeted and arrested could be a sobering foreshadow to how our culture and society is quickly moving to the beast system, right? Not that it's not already the beast system or whatever, but there's a process of weeding out stand-up individuals, people who will stand up for their morals, their desire for bodily autonomy, people that will stand up for their beliefs and faith in the Creator and what is good and evil, right? Well, they're weeding those people out of these systems right now, and the reason is so that everybody who's left will bow to the beast, right? All right, so pretty serious culture war going on. Check out this next clip of a pastor being terrorized and arrested for simply reading the Bible.
Interesting case surrounding a Seattle pastor who was arrested a couple of years back for reading the Bible in public. He has now been vindicated. Can you tell us a little bit about this story?
I can. It's really a fitting end to an outrageous situation, Billy. What had happened was the city of Seattle effectively made reading the Bible aloud a crime. And it first occurred on June 24, 2022. I don't know if that date sticks out to you, but that was the date that the U.S. Supreme Court rendered the Dobbs decision. That was a decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. So that there was this huge rally protest going on in downtown Seattle. And Pastor Meinke thought this would be a perfect opportunity to share the gospel. So he took his Bible and he goes out there to read the Bible. He has very earnest pro-life beliefs, but that was not his purpose. He really just wanted to share the gospel. So he turned to the book of John, chapter 1, verse 1, and started reading. But it was not received well. Some protesters started to crowd in around him, started saying some inflammatory, derogatory things, made him feel uncomfortable. So he moved off. He didn't want a conflict, so he moved off a few feet away to a new spot. But then at that spot, some protester grabbed his Bible and started ripping the pages out of it right in front of him. Undeterred, Pastor Meinke retrieved a second Bible and just resumed his reading. And he was able to do that for a while. But that's when Antifa members got involved. And they became physical. They started to pick up Pastor Meinke. He tried to grab a nearby sawhorse to keep them from doing that. But they picked up him and the sawhorse, walked over about a block and a half away, and then just dropped Pastor Meinke on the concrete.
Was he fighting back during this at all? I mean, what was he doing while they're picking him up and literally carrying him blocks away?
He really did not want to interact with them. He was trying to avoid any type of physical altercation. So he tried to grab the sawhorse. He tried to do what he could do. But once they started picking up, he just went with it, and they dropped him. It hurt, as you would expect. It was on concrete. But he started brushing himself off. And at that point, he was thinking, well, maybe I should go home. But he was convicted to stay. So he found another spot, and he started reading the book of John again. But regrettably, some other protesters came up, and one knocked him down. Another grabbed his shoe for some reason. They just grabbed his shoe. And then finally, after all those things, the police arrived. They were in the vicinity the whole time, but they didn't intercede until this point. And this is where it becomes the most disappointing. The police did not come to help Pastor Meineke. Rather, they told him he was the problem. And so at that point, they said, you have to leave. You have to leave the area. You can no longer speak with people. And Pastor Meineke just knew he had a First Amendment right to share his views. And so he wasn't just willing to walk away. He tried to reason with the police officers, but they arrested him. And they held him for several hours in a detaining cell until after the abortion rally had ended, really thwarting his opportunity to share the gospel.
Can I interject for a second to ask a question? Because part of this that sounds very disturbing to me, outside of the free speech part of this, which we'll talk about, religious liberty, you had other people physically grabbing a Bible, ripping pages out of it, picking him up, carrying him, dropping him. That would be violence, essentially, in all of those instances, and physical contact. Were any of those people arrested, held accountable, or even talked to by the authorities, as far as you know?
They were not. And that was really disturbing, that all these things happened in front of police officers, and apparently they just let it go, because to our knowledge, no one was even addressed. Certainly no one was arrested. And because the police officers, pursuant to their policy, figured that it was Pastor Meineke that was the problem. And so because of that stance, they only addressed him and him alone.
What was their rationale for arresting him? I mean, on what charge were they essentially holding him?
They had a policy in place based on a law of obstructing a police officer. And what they based it on is they had this policy that if someone is speaking and there is a hostile reaction to it, then they will ask the speaker to leave or to stop the activity. And if they do not, then the police officer will ask that person to move. They refer to it as a time, place, and manner, which typically is something that would be constitutional. But the way they employed this terminology is they would require the speaker to leave, so he would not have an audience at all. He couldn't speak to anyone. And if the speaker refuses, then that person is committing a crime. So it's really kind of a backwards way of addressing it. Instead of dealing with the individuals who are actually committing crimes, they were focusing in on a speaker who is really doing nothing wrong. And here.
Okay, so the significance of what you're hearing there, of course we hear this happen all the times. People's rights get violated by police in these public square situations. However, when we look at how the law and the language of the law is slightly twisted and altered in order to make it legal for, well, I would say, create the loophole to be able to arrest people and keep them from speaking things that they believe and hold earnestly and should be able to speak in the public square, it's a very dangerous infringement on the freedom of speech. And we already see our culture turn in visceral hate towards conservative, biblical-based beliefs. We also see the government, even in their kind of watchdog Patriot Act type lists, putting people who have a strong religious, faith-based tendency on, these, groups that could be extremists, right? So this next video is FBI agents visiting a man for simply putting some spicy Kamala Harris tweets, and they are mocking him mercilessly until the police leave, because he knows his rights. But we see the system is trying to take away this right of the freedom of speech away from people, and they're starting with conservative values and pro-choice values in terms of our bodily autonomy, or pro-life values. The whole thing is geared against us. Let's watch this video. Here we go.
Attorney General Merrick Garland gave a speech to a Fed convention in D.C. in which he insisted that Justice Department employees are actually victims of you, the American citizen, for all the hurtful things you say about them.
Over the past 3.5 years, there has been an escalation of attacks on the Justice Department's career lawyers, agents, and other personnel that go far beyond scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate and necessary oversight of our work. These attacks have come in the form of conspiracy theories, dangerous falsehoods, efforts to bully and intimidate career public servants by repeatedly and publicly singling them out, and threats of actual violence.
What are the threats of actual violence? Unspecified. But hey, speaking of actual violence, if you don't fill out your gun paperwork correctly, he'll come kill you. Or if your Facebook posts are too heated, he'll come kill you for that too. Oh, but those guys pointed guns. Yeah, well, such things are to be expected when you go door kicking at sunrise instead of, I don't know, how about just talking to the old disabled man or to the guy you could have otherwise very easily spoken to at the gun-free airport where he works running the place, which you know because you've been surveilling him, including at that airport, for months. So it's very ironic for Merrick Garland to complain about mean tweets as potentially linked to violence when he responds to such things with actual violence, or in today's story, with at least the intimidation of the possibility of it from federal law enforcement agents, which is what happened here. A guy made a spicy post about Merrick Garland's boss, or deputy boss, and yes, as we'll get to, it is red hot spicy, but for that, FBI agents made a visit to his home on Monday. Jeremy Kaufman is an entrepreneur behind the Odyssey video platform and other projects. He's a libertarian activist formerly in leadership with the Free State Project effort to get libertarians and freedom-minded people to move to New Hampshire, and he's involved in leadership with the State Libertarian Party as well. In the last few weeks, I've wondered how to handle myself if the feds pay me a visit regarding certain recent events in my life. So far, that hasn't happened. I've only received an email and expressed my intent not to accept their invitation for an FBI date night. But if the FBI does ask me out again, well, now there's proper demonstration for how to handle it, and I hope I can do it exactly as Jeremy Kaufman did. Whether you agree with what prompted this visit or not, I certainly think this country would be a better place if federal agents were not feared, and instead were treated with exactly the firmness and mockery that they were in this case. Merrick Garland's feelings be damned. Kaufman asked the agents to identify themselves. We get only one last name from one of them.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
How are you?
Who are you?
I'm Agent O'Donnell with the FBI.
Can you give your full name, please?
I'm Agent O'Donnell with the FBI.
Is that sufficient to identify as only one O'Donnell affiliated with the FBI?
In New Hampshire, yes.
Kaufman wisely recorded the entire encounter, which is his right, despite the request that he not.
Could you please state your full name, sir?
Could you please stop recording?
No. It's First Amendment right.
Okay.
What's your name, sir?
Could you stop recording, please?
Absolutely not.
Very polite of them. If only the FBI would honor that same request themselves. Hey, FBI, could you please stop recording? No, of course not. They'll record every damn piece of your life if they decide they want to. But the agents continue with the buddy tactic. Hey, man, we just want to talk to you. After all, couldn't you use a friend?
All I want to do is talk to you about a post that was made, and if you happen to be the one that made the post.
I want to talk to you about you guys coming here.
At that point, Kaufman starts ripping them for wasting public resources to investigate something they know is not just legal, but constitutionally protected. Now, I know some are disputing that claim of constitutional protection, but as we'll get to, they're wrong.
Say you make a salary of, I don't know what, low 100K? You guys making six figures? Factor in 50% expenses, overhead, maybe 100% expenses. Talking about burning a couple $100 an hour just here, let alone all the time you guys are spending to investigate something that you know is not against the law.
Ah, but we're not saying it's against the law, man. Like we said, we're just here for a friendly chat. You know, we could talk about the game while we drink a beer.
You're familiar with... So then why would you come?
Because we wanted to make sure that there weren't any...
No, you're coming because you're part of a regime that does this kind of thing when you know laws aren't being broken.
Now notice those two statements are largely in conflict. Oh, we're not saying there was any crime here, but also we're just here to make sure that there aren't any other threats. Well, that presupposes that there was a threat in the first place, which would be a criminal matter to investigate. And that gives away the intent. The intent, of course, is not just some sit down with the bros. The intent, even if they know that there is no legal prosecution to be had here, is to intimidate you out of what is your constitutional right. So now that we've reached that understanding, it is outright mockery time. And this is the stuff I'm talking about. With absolutely no apology to Merrick Garland and company whatsoever, listening to this makes me feel like Mel Gibson charging in The Patriot.
Didn't you guys read the Constitution? Do you not believe in
Alexander
America?
the Great,
Like, how do you do your jobs and go home?
Which apparently was made only...
You're walking away. Because nothing we did is against the law, and you guys are heads that try to act like bullies. And I hope you go home and are embarrassed. You can't even say your name on camera because you know that what you're doing is embarrassing. You know Americans that believe in the Constitution think you're laughable. And you go home and you think about what you did today. Go home and think about it, you cowards.
I love the approach of out-nannying the nanny state. Oh, you came here to put me in a timeout? No way, Mom. You're going in a timeout, and you're going to think about what you've done. In fact, you're going to bed without dinner tonight. Just kidding. They eat filet mignon every night while you count pennies for Cheerios. Now, of course, skeptics and critics will accuse me of burying the lead of...
Okay, that's enough of that. But this is an ongoing war of the freedom of speech, and we're seeing how society at large is afraid of free speech because we have a politically correct culture, and the people in power don't like getting made fun of, and so they want you to shut up. So they're going to use everything at their disposal to make sure you do, and that definitely means coming after the First Amendment. All right, so in another kind of direction, I'm very interested in this interesting interview regarding ancient armor, and it's the concept that the Greeks were using linen armor with glue, and this guy kind of breaks down the history of it, and I wanted to include it today because a lot of people are getting into their own fabrication, and I love the idea that people could make basically decent protective armor from home on their own, just with the right mindset and ingredients. But I just wanted to watch a couple minutes of this with you guys because I just love the concept of linen in the ancient times being used as a garment of war. When you think, oh, linen, like a hippie flowing garment, no, they were using like battle armor linen, right? And that's so cool and exciting. I know we've had friends in the past that are super into that topic, but anyways, check out this clip.
Project to try to reconstruct this mysterious type of armor that was used especially by the Greeks and Alexander the Great, called the linothorax, which apparently was made only out of linen and glue. Mm-hmm. So this seems a little odd that, that's not the sort of material once you want metal or something. But we had clear literary references that people, including Alexander, and the most famous image of Alexander is this Alexander mosaic found at Pompeii that shows him wearing one of these funny types of armor. The catch is none survived. It's organic materials. Mm-hmm. So we don't have any of them. And archaeologists like to study things that survive. So we have nice typologies of Greek armor made of bronze, Roman armor made of steel or sort of proto-steel. But this thing, this linothorax, was a mystery. And one of my undergraduate students, a guy named Scott Bartell, had a real, an Alexander obsession. He really loved Alexander.
As one should.
He had Alexandros tattooed on his arm in Greek. And he was a smart student. He was really smart. And so he one summer made himself an imitation of this thing of Alexander's just for fun. And he said, you know, can you give me some articles so I could do a better job? So I some scholarly articles about this armor. And with typical sort of, you know, academic arrogance, I said, why, Scott, of course I will. I'll give you some references. And I went and looked, and there weren't any. So at that point, I was like, tell you what, why don't you and I look into this and try to do a reconstruction using only the materials they would have had in the ancient world? And little did I know at the time, I thought maybe I'll get an article out of this. I mean, it ended up being a 10-year project involving, you know, 150 students, a couple dozen other faculty members, you know, ended up having 3 documentaries made out of it. And Scott and I ended up writing a scholarly book on this. So this is how, you know, you never know where your next project's going to come from. So it started with this undergraduate, turned into this huge thing. But it's what we did. We first said, all right, what are all the sources for this armor? And in the end, we found 65 accounts of it in ancient literature by 40 different authors. So we have literary descriptions. And then we looked at ancient art, and we were able to identify about 1,000 images in ancient art in vase paintings, pottery, bronze sculpture, tomb paintings, all these different things showing this armor. And then using those 2 things, we tried to backwards engineer a pattern to say, well, if this is what the end product looked like, what does it have to look like when you make it? And then we tried to reconstruct one of these things using only the glue and materials. So we had to use, you know, animal glues, rabbit glue. We had to end up sort of making our own linen, which comes from the flax plant. So we had to grow flax, harvest it, using only techniques in the ancient world. So modern flax goes through chemical processes. No, we had to do this the old-fashioned way, spin it into thread, so the thread into fabric, glue it all together. And then the fun part was, once we made these things, we subjected them to ballistics testing. So we shot them with arrows, which again were wooden reconstruction arrows using bronze arrowheads that were based on arrowheads found on ancient battlefields, to determine how good protection would this thing have been. And of course, the kind of fun one that everyone always likes and that the documentaries always want is at one point they're like, well, can you put Scott in one of these and shoot him? Yeah. And we're like, okay. I mean, at that point, we'd done about 1,000 test shots. I grew up shooting bows and arrows. I knew exactly how far that was going to go. So it's one of these, don't do this at home, kids.
So there's a million questions to ask here, but, you know, in general, how well, in terms of ballistics, does it work? Like, can it withstand arrows or direct strikes from like swords and axes and stuff like that?
Bottom line is a 1 centimeter thick linothorax. So laminated or even sewn, it doesn't have to be laminated, layer of linen is about as good protection as 2 millimeters of bronze, which was the thickest comparable body armor of bronze at the time. And we're talking 4th century, 5th century BC here. So classical and Hellenistic Greece. And that would have protected you from, let's say, random arrow strikes on the battlefield. So you could have gotten hit by arrows and they simply wouldn't have gone through.
What are the benefits? So is there a major weight difference?
Yes. So the benefits of this are it's much lighter than metal armor. So the linothorax is about 11 pounds. A bronze cuirass of comparable protection would have been about 24 to 6 pounds. A chainmail shirt would be about 28, 27 pounds. It's cooler. I mean, you know, the Mediterranean's a hot place with the hot sun. Even today, you know, a linen shirt is something you wear when you want to be cool. So it's much lighter. That gives your troops greater endurance on the battlefield. They can run farther, fight longer. It's cheaper. You don't need a blacksmith who's a specialist to make it. In fact, probably, this is interesting, any woman in the ancient world could have made one of these because they were the ones who spun thread and sewed it into fabric. So I can easily see in a household a mother making this for her son, a wife making it for her husband. So it's a form of armor you could have made domestically that would have been, you know, maybe not the greatest armor, but pretty good, pretty comparable to bronze armor.
And it's amazing that you used all the materials they had at the time and none of the modern techniques. But I should probably say, maybe you can speak to that, they were probably much better at doing that than you are, right? Because like, you know, again, generational, it's a skill. And it's a skill that probably is practiced across decades, across centuries.
I mean, in terms of producing the fabric, I'm sure they could do it 10 times faster than we could. Just that's a speed thing. But it's still incredibly labor intensive. Where I think there's a big difference between our reconstruction and ancient ones is in the glue. So we ended up using a kind of least common denominator glue. We used rabbit glue because it would have been available anywhere and it's cheap. But in the ancient world, they did have basically the equivalent of super glues. I mean, we found, for example, helmets that were fished out of a river in Germany that were had metal parts glued together that after 2,000 years of immersion in water were still glued together. So they had some great glues. We just don't know what the recipes for them were. So we went the opposite tack and said, well, we're just going to make something that we know they could have made. So it was at least this good. You know what I'm saying?
But actually, this is a materials thing, but I think glue, aside from helping glue things together, it can also be a thing that serves as armor. So like if you glue things correctly, the way it permeates the material that it's gluing can strengthen the material, the integrity of the material. That's an art and a science probably that they understood deeply.
The process of lamination did add something. So there's actually a huge debate among scholars and actually a sort of amateur archaeologist that was this linothorax thing glued together, or was it simply sewn together? Was it composite, partially linen, partially leather, or other materials? And my honest answer is I think it's all of the above. Because again, every piece of armor in the ancient world was an individual creation. So I think if you had some spare leather, you put that in. If you wanted to make one that was just sewn together or even quilted, stuffed with stuff, you do that. Maybe you were good at gluing stuff, you use that. So I think there's no one answer. We investigated one possibility because we just had limited time and money and resources, but I think all these other things existed at the same time and were variants of it.
Just as a small aside, I just think this is a fascinating journey you went on. I love it. Sort of answering really important questions about, in this case, armor, about military equipment and technology that archaeologists can't answer by using all the sources you can to understand what it looked like, what were the materials, using the materials at the time, and actually doing ballistic testing. It's really cool. It's really cool that you see that there's a hole in the literature. Yeah. Nobody studied it, and going hard and doing it the right way to sort of uncover this. I don't know. I think it's an amazing mystery about the ancient world.
I mean, shifting from just sort of Roman history in general to my research that I've done as a scholar, the theme that runs throughout my scholarship is practical stuff. Yeah. I'm interested, how did this actually work in the ancient world? So there's...
All right, that's good. So why did I show you guys that? We took a little detour into Jake's history segment, I guess, this week, right? Well, here's the primary reason. I thought it was one interesting... The concept that this is something that the ladies were doing at home. They were making armor for their husbands and clothing and whatnot. But in today's world, there's all this fear and talk of World War III. And right now, a very expensive, popular prepper item to buy online is body armor. And unfortunately, unless you have the big bucks, it can be very costly. Very costly indeed. And so I wanted to share that and kind of the breakdown of how they did it in the ancient times, and how he was like, we have access to super glues today, but we made the recreation with a lesser, like, rabbit glue. So imagine what people could do with like local stuff at the hardware store, a good, solid super glue and fabric, and come up with some cool homemade body armor, for surviving the apocalypse, right? Like, that's what we all want to do, right? But I just thought that was super sweet. With that shared, we have recently a endorsement for Kamala Harris from Taylor Swift. And then, of course, the media jumped on it and became this whole conspiracy thing, and Trump tweeted and a back and forth, this and that. But there was this compilation somebody put together about how Taylor Swift is not a psyop. And we're going to watch this video once or twice and just remind ourselves why the media is such a powerful tool. Check this out.
Warning, Taylor Swift is not a psyop. Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor
Swift is not a psyop. Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
This is extremely dangerous.
One more time, just because it's hilarious.
Warning, Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
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 Taylor
Swift is not a psyop.
Taylor Swift is not a psyop.
All right, guys. So Taylor Swift is not a psyop, but the tools of modern media and the mainstream media to sway the opinions of the masses is just, it's so in our face. And we're a generation that gets to witness this all happen. And whether it's a good or bad thing that Taylor Swift did not endorse Trump but endorsed Kamala, I think you guys can make that decision, right? Because, we all know, some of the interesting effects that pop music and pop culture have on culture as a whole. And when somebody represents themselves a certain way and they lead the masses into one particular thought pattern, we can kind of judge them based on their fruit. All right, so in another really interesting development, here's some Ukrainian drone attacks.
Ukraine's SBU State Security Service told Reuters on Wednesday. This unverified footage shows a huge ball of flames blasting into the sky and multiple detonations. The source said the warehouse in the town of Toropets contained weapons intended for tactical missile systems, as well as guided aerial bombs and artillery ammunition, and that a fire from the blast took hold of a nearly 4-mile wide area. The Ukraine SBU source said it was part of reducing the enemy's missile potential, which it uses to destroy Ukrainian cities. War bloggers and media reported earlier on Wednesday the attack, over 200 miles west of Moscow, was near the site of a large Russian arsenal. NASA satellites picked up intense heat sources emanating from an area of about 5 square miles at the site in the early hours, and earthquake monitoring stations picked up what sensors thought was a small earthquake in the area. Explosions could be heard in the distance as Tver's governor Igor Rudynya addressed local media. He made no mention of the weapons warehouse and said Russia's air defense system successfully shot down unmanned aerial vehicles overnight, with falling debris causing the fire to start. He added that evacuations of residents in the area were underway. Rudynya later said the fire had been put out and residents could return with no recorded fatalities. Russian state media have in the past reported that a major arsenal for conventional weapons was located at the site of the blasts. State media, which is now subject to military censorship laws, was muted in its reporting on Wednesday. Both sides deny attacking civilians in the war fought since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022.
Very interesting. Look at that imagery of the explosions and stuff. It looks like hell over there. Yep. Absolutely. But this advancement in technology is very interesting. Here's another one regarding some stuff happening at Kamala Harris's rally recently. Check this out.
At 80-something million votes again. Something ain't right. And then all these people come from buses. And it's kind of weird because at the Trump events, you don't really have like organized buses like that. People just kind of show up and park on their own. But at the Kamala rally, there's just these lines of buses at every event, which is weird. And a lot of the people are also the same people that attend multiple rallies. Can you read those tweets?
Any of the same ones from previous events, because this guy's tracking the cell phones, I guess. And he says 90% have been to 3+ rallies. 54% were even at Arizona and Nevada rallies.
So it's all the same people. And as we've said in the show before, Kamala's support is all fake. Yeah. It's all contrived. It's not very real. And that seems to be the proof.
It's not all. Obviously, everybody here has a relative or a person who like, oh, I'm voting for Kamala. I can't stand Trump. But there's a difference between voting against Trump and then going to a Kamala Harris rally where she's going to do a black accent.
90% fake.
Yeah.
You convinced me. 90% fake.
Wow. I mean, it's not just the media that they're contorting. It's public appearance. They're busing people to rallies to make it look like one, area has a great support of a public figure, and you should vote. Look at all the support. And that's all it takes, right? That's kind of their mindset is if one person shows up and they saw like an empty rally, nobody showed up that particular day, then that would sway them to, look elsewhere. But you see all these people just pumped up and cheering. Did you know that they were paid to do that? Mm-hmm. Have you asked that question? All right, so this next video is another way that we are manipulated. We've covered the media. We've covered publicly how events are manipulated. But now let's look at our interactions socially. Check this out.
Exactly. I think it's Instagram. Was doing it with her boyfriend, and they were both looking at the same thing, but they had different comments. Yeah. We're mocking the man, and the comments on his side was mocking the woman.
Yes. Whenever I'm looking at comments, I make the idiot mistake of thinking this represents some consensus that, but actually, no, you're just looking at the algorithm serving the comments and the content. That is so up.
The comments are supposed to be a conversation about the thing. So if you're curating the conversation in an unnatural way, that's very different than showing me what I want to see.
Yes.
Because now you're changing the dynamics of how things are discussed.
Yes, sir. That's the evil right there. That's the evil.
That's crazy.
The other assumption with the algorithm is that the algorithm is just like random, or it's using some set of variables and serving things up. But this is an idiot assumption. I mean, you could, if you are controlling comments, then that means like, all right, let's just like make people mad at each other. Let's make people completely pissed at each other as much as possible. Convey this idea that there's like these massive divides between us, and then they're gonna fight each other instead of recognizing they're pretty much the same.
So they're curating what we interact with online. We've talked about this many times at Skiba News Nation. You guys already know all this. But oh man, it is so in your face. And of course, it's election year, and we're coming up to November, guys. And so it makes sense that they're ramping this up. And so I like to point out these different areas of how they manipulate us, as they do every election cycle, in a much greater degree than usually. But yeah, they do this all the time, of course. Here's an interesting article that I thought you guys would be interested in terms of our more conspiracy-minded among us and the fans of Rob Skiba's research, of course. Check this out. Archaeologists discover remains of decapitated vampire children believed to be demonic beings. Okay, let's look at this a little bit. So this article says that archaeologists in Poland were flabbergasted after discovering the remains of alleged vampire children, one of which was decapitated to allegedly prevent them from rising from the grave. The burial clearly shows signs of anti-vampire practices. An archaeologist in the Lublin Voivodeship Conservative of Monuments who led the excavation said in a statement, workers had reportedly initially stumbled across these skeletons while removing tree roots for an ongoing garden renovation project at the Palace of Bishops in Shalom. All right, so here's some pictures of them finding these things, and could they be uncovering some 13th century Nephilim? I don't know, but it is very interesting. Based on the earth they were found in and associated pottery fragments, the bones were allegedly date back to the 13th century, a time when precautions were taken to prevent dead from reanimating. Oh man, that's really interesting. In some of my personal interests with extra biblical texts, the book of 2nd Baruch leaves some hints at a zombie apocalypse preceding the day of the Lord. And that's really interesting in terms of our media and the zombie apocalypse content that we see and digest in today's world, that they actually believed in something like that back in the day in the 13th century in their superstitions. So it's kind of interesting. But we know that when they find really interesting, strange creatures, giants, Nephilim, bones, there's always a cover-up. So if they have found real vampires, I'm sure we'll not be getting our hands on those bodies anytime soon.
Yep.
All right, here's another video that I think is very important.
Hezbollah reportedly ordered around 5,000 pagers from Taiwan, a country known for producing about 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. These pagers were destined for Lebanon. However, what makes this story particularly intriguing is what allegedly happened during the shipment process. At some point along the way, a spy agency is believed to have intercepted the shipment and tampered with the pagers. They discreetly altered the internal components, replacing one of the two identical batteries with a hidden explosive device. This modification was done so subtly that it went unnoticed. Once the changes were made, the altered pagers were quietly sent back to Hezbollah as if nothing had happened. To help you understand better about the explosive pager, let's take a look at how it works. At its core, the battery powers the entire device. This is the speaker and emits audio alerts to notify the user of incoming messages. The motor adds a physical vibration alert, making the pager effective in silent mode. The radio antenna coil receives wireless signals like VHS, and the microprocessor converts these signals into readable messages. In short, these are often low-tech and difficult to track. Inside a typical pager, you'll notice these components working together, particularly the batteries which power the device. Now, let's consider a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you're looking at two identical batteries inside the pager. Although this is speculative, if it were part of a spy agency, we might consider disguising one of the two identical batteries for a different purpose. One battery would provide the necessary power for the device, while the other could potentially serve as an explosive cleverly concealed within the pager. To expand on this theory, an alkaline AA battery weighs approximately 23 grams. Interestingly, reports in the news have mentioned that an explosive weighing about 20 grams was detonated. This similarity in weight lends some plausibility to the idea that a battery could be used as a disguised explosive device. We believe there was a timer for triggering this explosive that can disable or unalive an adult if placed at the correct time. Since 2,750 were injured, which cannot be a coincidence. In one instance, a pager explosion occurred at a grocery store, and a small handheld device, seemingly just another pager, was carried by a possible Hezbollah operative. It unexpectedly detonated, causing injuries to the user. The explosion, though localized, inflicted harm and sowed fear among those present. This raises the question, why did Hezbollah begin using pagers instead of simple mobile phones? Well,
so cell phones can be exploded possibly by, nefarious organizations that want to take people out. But one last area of conversation that I wanted to have with you guys, Jeremiah, it is very interesting that Donald Trump has undergone another assassination attempt, and to add to the heap of conspiratorial mongering about how the system is setting us up to, be predictively programmed that they're going after Trump, check this out. It's a Time magazine article that was posted on 9/11, and it looks like this. Look, it says, "In trouble." You see, okay. It says, "In trouble." Time magazine, right? Donald Trump's on the golf course, looking back behind him, and this was posted the day before this exact scenario happened.
Yep. I wonder.
My conspiracy senses are tingling.
And he's going backwards too, which is interesting. Because he was the hole behind where
he's stuck in a trap.
Yep.
A sand trap.
Wow. Now I know you guys probably have seen all the recent stuff talking about this situation and all the thoughts on, who's this guy, oh, they're just, I mean, when you start to see multiple attempts on somebody's life like we are seeing, it almost makes me think, all right, they're gonna eventually get him somehow, God forbid, right? But they're really actively trying to get him if this is a coordinated kind of conspiracy. Either that or these people are going to spur on copycat situations, which makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy anyway. So I would say Trump needs to basically be locked down until at least he's in the White House. He needs to get behind some barricaded steel doors or something so that nobody can take him out, because it looks like they're really trying now. What do you think, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy what they're doing. I mean, the more that they call him a threat to democracy, the more people are going to try to attack him. And it's just sad because they make us out to be crazy for saying stuff like that. It's just retarded.
This time, the internet was wise and archived all of his socials as much as possible before the FBI took it all down. So here's some basics on what we know about him and one really interesting rabbit hole about who he might be.
The social media history of Ryan Ralph grabbed prior to it being scrubbed. This goes beyond the usual territory of speculative conspiracy theory pundits, a moniker that I'm often given. Edward Snowden himself considers this to be an unusual event. In fact, 2 assassination attempts on the life of a presidential candidate in a matter of months has got to be considered peculiar by anybody's standards. Let's have a look at this video before having a more intrinsic and integrated look into the peculiar identity of the man that has made the most recent and hopefully last assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
This time, the internet was wise and archived all of his socials as much as possible before the FBI took it all down. So here's some basics on what we know about him and one really interesting rabbit hole about who he might be. Right off the bat though, it's super early. This is all speculative. Take your time, pump the brakes. We're just digging through dirty laundry. We don't know what sticks yet. But this guy is a private American citizen who traveled to Ukraine on his own dime, to help recruit civilian soldiers to fight for Ukraine and Afghan special forces. He was recruiting on his Facebook page. Here's an archive of all of his tweets that look pretty damn automated to me. They pretty much all look like this. But I grabbed everyone that he followed on Twitter before they deleted it. He only followed 60. And right down at the bottom of that list, which I think indicates his first follow, is this girl named Sue Kim, who is ex-CIA, along with some other very interesting things. But her account is private, meaning why does he follow her? I've been digging around and one of my followers said that they found her in the people that follow him back. He says that she was at the bottom of his followed list, meaning that she followed him right when he made the account. That would make sense, seeing as she's at the bottom of his following list of who he follows too. I mean, every asset needs a handler. And when you go through some of these other affiliations here, you get what is essentially the CIA training grounds at Johns Hopkins University. It explores the relationship between politics and the many kinds of military power, from the use of terror by small non-state groups to the threatened use of nuclear weapons. Its director is John McLaughlin, who is literally an ex-acting director of the CIA and ex-deputy director of the CIA, 3-decade career at the CIA. David is third on the list of people at the top of this institution at the university. 30-year career in Army Special Forces, various special operations, invading various countries, as well as Operation Enduring Freedom. You get the idea. Anyways, Rand Corporation. That's a military industrial complex think tank, kind of like the Atlantic Council. And LMI org. Yeah, that's like a military industrial complex education and training program as well. Preliminary findings on the internet when you search our homeboy, the shooter, show his arrest record, including in 2002, possession of weapons of mass destruction, class F felony. Yeah, that sounds like some operative shit to me. This is a photo of the weapon he used and the setup he had. People are speculating it looks an awful lot like, Russian, Ukrainian class of rifle. He's doing these weird recruitment ops in Ukraine for civilians Well, he's like posting on his Facebook all the time to like no followers about how he's recruiting hundreds of civilians to fight for Ukraine, posting for like Afghan special forces to contact him so they can come fight in Ukraine. But he's like just a random citizen from Hawaii. And one of the 60 people he follows is this CIA gal that allegedly follows him back. That looks an awful lot like a handler or a contact.
No wonder the legacy media has to toe the line so assiduously when it comes to matters of this nature, because the change in independent media is so epochal and extraordinary that they have to work incredibly hard to ensure that people don't gain access to, if not accurate reporting, then at least open reporting. It's still early in this process and no one can make any definitive claims.
Failed on July 13th of this year, just 40-something days ago. And 2 days after it happened, I came out and said, the deep state is going to try again, and they're going to try to frame Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you that we're not in normal times. World War III, nuclear war is this close. They just fired 5 shots at Trump and hit him in the side of the head. And the media's like, oh, big deal, he survived an assassination attempt. And now they've tried to kill him with a gun. They're going to try to poison him. So Trump, inside circle, listen to me. And I know you've listened before. You've had the Secret Service call me. I've briefed them on stuff. Listen to me. They're going to try to poison him now. This blew up in their face. They failed. They fired 5 shots. They killed 2 people. This means the New World Order is going for broke. But definitely the globalists are scared right now. And in closing, don't you agree they're going to try to kill Trump even more now?
Yeah, he's in the biggest threat. I mean, he needs more protection than he's ever had, because right now it's basically guaranteed, like you said, that he's going to win because more people are coming on board. So he needs to be protected maximally.
All right, folks.
And they used to all be like the top 5 in the charts was all Beatles records. These assassination attempts are coming so quickly, I haven't really got over the last one.
And what are you doing here in Ukraine?
My initial goal was to come and fight. I think, everybody around the globe should be motivated to come here and support the Ukrainians and support the army, no matter what gender, age, anything. Everybody should be here supporting the army. But I'm 56, so initially they were like, well, I have no military experience. So they're like, you're not an ideal candidate. So they said, not right this minute. So plan B was to come here to Kyiv and promote getting more people here. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of people here fighting with the Ukrainians. We need, we've got 190 countries around the world, and we need thousands from all of them. If the governments will not send their official military, then we civilians have to pick up the torch and make this thing happen.
That's extraordinary. I suppose if that were another issue, another subject, another conflict, it would be difficult not to see that kind of rhetoric as the result of radicalisation. Do you remember how popular that term was when young British men and women were joining ISIS? What's radicalised them? Increasingly, I'm beginning to believe that what we regard as the mainstream dominant culture is in itself extreme. Extreme in that it extracts real compassion. Extreme in that it extracts real reason. Extreme in that it encourages a kind of institutional solipsism. What I mean by that is that all of us live so sort of entrenched within our own thoughts and within our own wants, within our own fears, that we've lost touch not only with our divine selves, but even our animal selves. That every concept that would have once been regarded as ordinary and normal within our culture, whether that's gender identity or family, has become chaotic and mercurial and challenged. And
yeah, crazy time to be alive. All these politics are really interesting to watch. I mean, not only this, but the fact that the shooter was also in a BlackRock commercial, allegedly. Look at this picture here.
Yep.
No such thing as coincidence at this level. This is both of the guys, both of them being in a clip that was used by an organization that was somehow connected to BlackRock. So, I mean, of course, the first shooter assassin that happened, a little over 2 months ago, he was in basically a straight up BlackRock commercial. And then you have this other guy who was featured in a protest in a video that was used for, so it's just crazy. But it could all be a coincidence once again. And in other news, we had that recent debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. And there's some leaks that are alleging that Lindsey Davis and David Muir were each paid $1 million from Kamala's campaign for moderating the ABC debate. But at this point, I actually, I didn't find out till after because I don't really watch those type of things. But what were your thoughts on that event, Jeremiah?
Oh, it was definitely rigged. Yeah, I heard that the woman was like a sorority sister of Kamala Harris, which is pretty interesting. So, don't know how true that is, but,
Yeah, I mean, that it's not fair. If the ABC, check this clip out, the video out, the ABC moderator, Lindsay, admitted fact-checking was only planned for Trump. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, whatever. Either way, that's how the cookie crumbles, as they say.
Well, thank you for being here today for our press conference on what I describe as the most important issue that's getting the least amount of attention relative to its importance in our country. And like many other issues, we're going to be deciding on November 5 what kind of a country we're going to be, and it applies to this issue as well. President Trump had withdrawn the U.S. from the WHO, and of course the Biden administration, like every other disastrous decision they made, reversed those policies when the Biden-Harris administration got in charge. Well, later this week, the UN is going to hold a, quote, summit for the future. And they're going to produce, this is right from their website, an intergovernmentally negotiated, action-oriented pact for the future with a chapter on transforming global governance. Ascending beyond the powers being sought by its subordinate agency, the WHO, the UN is seeking even broader and more powerful authority, as you will hear a lot about today. The Biden-Harris administration apparently intends to fully support the surrender and compliance of the U.S. to the UN in these endeavors. They are aligned with the international globalists that hate America, that hate the Constitution, that hate our founders, that hate our founding Judeo-Christian principles, and they want America to become like the rest of the world. They don't want us to be subordinate to or governed by our Constitution. No, they want America to be subordinate to and governed by the UN, the World Health Assembly, and the WHO. And in fact, they intend to join with others at the UN summit this week to vote to award additional powers to the UN Secretary General. They seek to facilitate the evolution of the UN from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. These powers would be triggered by any one of a number of so-called global emergencies, whether it was a so-called climate emergency, a health emergency, a cyber emergency, or a gun violence emergency, whatever that's supposed to be, a financial emergency, or whatever they deem appropriate. And the Biden-Harris administration is in full agreement with the UN and the WHO on efforts to place us under their authority and to require such things as their international health regulations, including the surveillance of U.S. citizens, the censoring of dissenting views, and much more. The American people didn't vote for this, and they don't support this, and it's up to the people's representatives, that's us gathered here today, to have a responsibility to expose this and to reject this.
All right, so that's all the news for this week, Jeremiah. And one quick little thing before we go. I found a picture of my board game photo shoot that recently happened, and I think you'll love it, and I think it'll show our audience kind of how far along the game is. But check this picture out. Took this little photo shoot just the other day. These are my painted figure warriors that are the pawns that people can purchase to play the game. But every standard game will come with these sticker pawns, which these are figures that are all drawn from the artwork on the cards, and I'm really excited. So this is kind of what the game will look like if you're out sitting under the the shaded tree outside playing with your family and loved ones. But I took this kind of artsy picture, and I wanted to share it with you guys since my website will be available this Friday.
Love it, man.
Sweet, man. All right, so that's all for this week, man.
All right, thank you for another great current news as always. Now a quick look at how you can connect with us here at Skiba News Nation. So check this out. Don't forget about our Skiba News Nation hotline, where you can leave us a voicemail telling us what topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or ask us a question and we'll answer it on the show. We can't wait to hear your voicemail. Our number is 214-617-3330. You can also write us a letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560271, The Colony, Texas 75056. I will definitely write you back. And make sure that you check out JJ's CBD Rub on jjcbdrub.com. So it's about that time for an all-new Opa's Corner. Take it away, Opa.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
The strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to believe it or not.
Believe it or not, you.
Wally, believe it or not.
Believe it or not.
Believe it!
You're a loony.
A study from Stockholm University reveals that 2 bad nights of sleep can make you feel over 4 years older than you actually are. Believe it or not. Elephants sometimes lie down to get the deep REM sleep they need to stay healthy. Believe it or not. Birds can sleep with 1/2 of their brain at a time, while the other half remains alert. Believe it or not. To avoid traffic, Swiss locals often float down the Rhine River to get home. Believe it or not. The New York City water supply system leaks on an average 20 million gallons a day. Believe it or not. In 2024, the New York Yankees were on the field during 2 natural phenomena. First, an earthquake, and then an eclipse. Believe it or not. Ballooning was once a sport in the Olympic Games. Believe it or not. And poetry was once an Olympic sport. Believe it or not. American Airlines saved nearly $40,000 a year by eliminating 1 olive from the salad they served each passenger. Believe it or not. The J.W. Westcott II operates out of Detroit, Michigan, and is the only floating post office in the United States. The ship even has its own zip code. Believe it or not. Tigers are powerful eaters and can consume 75 pounds or more of meat in a single feeding. Believe it or not. New Jersey had 5 governors in the span of 8 days in early 2002, with the shortest term being only 90 minutes. Believe it or not. It's estimated that birds eat between 400 and 500 million tons of insects annually. Believe it or not. The Museum of Salt and Pepper Shakers in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, is the home to over 20,000 pairs of salt and pepper shakers. Believe it or not. Peeps used to have wings, but they were removed in 1955. Believe it or not. Coca-Cola is the second most widely understood term in the world, after OK. Believe it or not. Inchnolome Island is a small island in Scotland that's been mysteriously covered in gnomes since 2020. Believe it or not. In 2024, Heritage Auctions sold a 1938 comic book featuring the first appearance of Superman for $6 million. Believe it or not. The sport of chariot racing made a comeback in the 1920s. Only this time with motorcycles. Believe it or not. Originally located in New York and New Jersey, Hollywood moved to Los Angeles to escape Thomas Edison's patents. Believe it or not. I was hit on the head with a can of soda. Luckily, it was a soft drink. I used to steal soap, but now I'm clean. I used to be afraid of hurdles, but I got over it. I got rid of my vacuum cleaner. It was just collecting dust. My mom asked me to put the cat out. I didn't know it was on fire.
Those Haitians.
I failed math so many times at school, I can't even count. I know they say that money talks, but all mine says is, goodbye. My wife just found out I replaced our bed with a trampoline. She hit the ceiling. My therapist says I have a preoccupation for revenge. We'll see about that. I always borrow money from a pessimist. They'll never expect it back. Doctor, there's a patient online that says he's invisible. Well, tell him I can't see him right now. A recent study has found that women who carry a little extra weight live longer than the men who mention it. Before you criticize someone, walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you do criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. Last night, my girlfriend was complaining I never listen to her. Or something like that. People who take care of chickens are literally chicken tenders.
That's fun.
If attacked by a mob of clowns, go for the juggler. If you don't pay your exorcist, do you get repossessed? I have a few jokes about unemployed people, but none of them work. I want to hang a map of the world in my house. Then I'm going to put pins into all the locations I've traveled to. But first I'm going to have to travel to the top 2 corners of the map so it won't fall down. I was having dinner with 2 world chess champions. We had a check tablecloth, and it took them 2 hours to pass the salt. I don't think this new electric fence is engendering the fare we intended. I'm being tested? That's why I exist? Yup. Have a seat. 1 hour to complete your test. In all the time I've known him, he never once changed his clothes. Somewhere near the city of Troy, circa the 13th century BC. Me? What's wrong with you roping one of them? Support groups for unfortunately named fish. Who would like to talk first? The suckerfish, the blowfish, the clownfish, or the blobfish? So, class, how would you describe today's solar eclipse?
Painful. I caught a big one, Dad. What should I do?
Throw it in the cooler and we'll clean it later. Loch Ness. Anything you say, Mr. Einstein, can be used to explain the origin of the universe. You don't understand. I meant I'm down with the king. I think he's awesome. It's how all the kids talk. Down with the king. This should be a fast race. For the first time ever in Olympic competition, these athletes will be doing a litter box start.
I don't know why they're so upset. If they've child-proofed the house, why can't we adult-proof it? Mysteries of physics. How is it not smaller? The very short-lived career of the infamous roller coaster bandit. Gee, their hands are already over their heads, and I didn't even have to tell them to stick 'em up. Man, I must be a natural. Circus lion hunting. Hey, watch it with that thing. That's a dangerous weapon.
Psychic reading. Psychic. Palms read, tarot cards, crystal ball, astrologer, mind reader, clairvoyant. Psychic reader.
Why didn't you just tell me? I can't read your mind, you know. Remember, it's may I take your plate, not may I lick your plate. Yeah, that's a tough one for me. It looks like the recent heavy rains have claimed their first victim. We need you to settle an argument for us. Which is more adorable, a cat on a Roomba or a dog on a skateboard?
Cat on a Roomba.
Where is Catwoman? Isn't she coming with us? She got sidetracked. I told you this was a swanky restaurant. I remember carving one of these for the Pinewood Derby when I was 12.
Cybertruck.
Yeah, okay, you surrender. We get it. That's great. Now who's in charge around here? Hello? Yoo-hoo! History's forgotten, ill-fated siege of Troy by mimes in a giant invisible box. Wife of Pi. He's irrational, and he goes on and on. If Isaac Newton lived in the social media age. Apple fell on my head today, LOL. Here's a pic. Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Your shampoo delivery is here. What I did on my summer vacation.
That's accurate.
Today I'm announcing that I will run. Then I'll freeze and decide not to run. Then I'll change my mind, run, freeze again, reconsider, stop running, think it over some more, then make a dash for it. Me? What's wrong with one of you guys telling him to stop hogging the bird bath? Do it yourself books. In Wisconsin, you can smell the dairy air. And that concludes another Opa's Corner.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
Opa's Corner is now available on my own YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you, Opa, for another great Opa's Corner. Now let's take a quick look at our new and improved BabylonRisingBooks.com.
Check out our new and improved BabylonRisingBooks.com, where you can get Rob Skiba's books, bundles, DVDs, DVD-ROMs, videos, and so much more. You can even get Sheila and Jeremiah's books, so check it out now.
It's time for an all-new History's Mysteries. So this week for History's Mysteries, we're going to be talking about Disneyland, the dark side of the happiest place on earth. Delving deep into the lesser known truths about Disneyland, a place dubbed the happiest place on earth, but for many, it's anything but. So let's explore why with this first clip, and we'll take it from there.
September 22nd, 2000, Anaheim, California.
It's another magical day at the happiest place on earth, Disneyland.
4-year-old Brandon Tucker and his family arrive at the famous theme park to celebrate his mother's birthday. Everyone is excited for the fun awaiting them, and as always, the magic of Disneyland does not disappoint. The Zuckers spent the whole day exploring the park and having a blast, but just as they were about to leave, they decided to hop on one last ride, the Roger Rabbit cartoon spin. It seemed like the perfect way to end their Disneyland adventure. So when they reached the front of the line, Brandon, his older brother, and his mom got into one of the cartoonish cars, while his father and grandmother got into the one behind them. Soon the ride started chugging down the tracks. The boys were obviously excited for the cars to start spinning, but as soon as they did start spinning, everything went horribly wrong. For some reason, the force of the spinning car threw little Brandon from the vehicle, and he fell straight onto the track where the other cars were quickly approaching. It all happened so fast that there was no time to stop the ride, and within seconds, the next car carrying his dad and his grandma pinned Brandon to the tracks. With his body folded forward at the waist, and the full weight of the car pushing into his back, Brandon was dragged a full 10 feet before the ride was forced to stop. But the horror didn't end there. It took a whole 10 minutes for staff to get him out from under the car, and by then the damage had already been done. Brandon had already gone several minutes without a pulse or breathing. In that time, he suffered severe brain damage, and even though he survived the accident for a while, he was never able to fully recover. He never walked or spoke again. Brandon lived out the rest of his life in a long-term care facility for kids with brain injuries, until he passed away in his mother's arms 8 years after the tragic accidents. All because his family wanted to take a trip to Disneyland. After a detailed investigation by the State Division of Occupational Safety and Health, they concluded that the Disneyland employees did not put Brandon into the ride properly. Since he was so small, he was supposed to be the furthest one from the entryway of the car, but instead he was positioned right next to it. Plus, they didn't even fully lower the lap bar to keep Brandon strapped in. The state ordered Disneyland to make big changes to the ride safety procedures, including putting in sensor equipment below each car to automatically stop them if anything goes wrong. But the thing about Brandon Zucker's horrible accident at Disneyland that day is that it wasn't just some one-time fluke. This wasn't just an extremely unlucky accident. It was all part of a terrifying trend. In the years leading up to Brandon's tragedy, there were way more accidents than usual happening at the park, which was crazy because Disneyland was expected to be the standard for theme park safety. It had always been considered the most secure theme park in the country. People trusted Disneyland because they went above and beyond to keep their kids safe. So what happened? Why had the happiest place on earth suddenly become a bright and shiny death trap? Well, as it turns out, most of these accidents started soon after Disneyland hired the most powerful, the most influential, the most ruthless consulting company out there, a consulting company called McKinsey. You may remember McKinsey from when they pushed Purdue Pharma to sling OxyContin to the masses, causing the opioid epidemic, or when McKinsey offered consulting to Enron. Enron was created by an ex-McKinsey employee. Yes, this is the consulting company that Disneyland hired, and it's a stark reminder of what happens when you make a deal with the devil. This video is based on the book When McKinsey Comes to Town, which goes into all the evil, all the tragedy, all the suffering that happens when McKinsey comes to town.
So when people think of Disney, they think of, a clean park, a safe place, a family-friendly thing, including myself for a long time. Me and Opa rode several of those rides, probably all of them. And there's a lot more beneath the surface that most visitors will never see. So in this next clip, we're going to uncover what's behind When McKinsey Comes to Town. So check this out.
By the 1990s, Disneyland had been open for more than 4 decades and had become the most famous theme park in America. Every year, millions of visitors from all over the world came to experience the magic and joy of Disneyland, and the park was turning a massive profits. But then in 1994, things started changing. That year, Disneyland got a new top executive named Paul Pressler. Paul thought that it was time to make even more money. It was time to squeeze every last penny out of the park as possible. And so he decided to hire the best guys out there to help, McKinsey & Company. McKinsey was founded back in 1926, and since then they've become the most powerful, the most influential consulting firm on the planet. And what exactly is this vague thing called consulting? Well, it's actually very simple. Corporations want to make more profit, so they hire McKinsey to tell them what to do to make more money. And shockingly, it works. McKinsey has a track record of making their clients very, very rich, no matter the costs. And that is why McKinsey has been able to sink their teeth into everyone. From trillion-dollar companies like Microsoft to government entities like the US Department of Energy, which is responsible for America's nukes. And so Paul Pressler thought who better than McKinsey to make Disneyland more profitable. And so they signed the contract, and McKinsey proceeded to keep a close eye on the operations of Disneyland for over a year. After that year passed by, McKinsey came back to Paul with a plan for how the park could bring in more money than ever before. And their plan could not have been more genius. See, a really big expense for theme parks like Disneyland is maintenance. making sure the rides are well maintained and safe for visitors. The problem was, Disneyland was putting their most experienced employees who had the most knowledge about the rides in charge of keeping the ride safe, which was costing them a lot of money. Senior employees cost a lot of money. And so Mackenzie's recommendation was simple. Disneyland should use a technique called reliability-centered maintenance. It was a cool sounding strategy. It sounded all technical and fancy. It was based on a legit procedure originally used by the aviation industry to track maintenance histories over time. But in reality for Disneyland, it was all about saving money on these expensive maintenance costs. According to Mackenzie, all Disneyland needed to do was fire these expensive experienced employees and hire less knowledgeable outside contractors who charge way less. Less maintenance costs more money, simple. But obviously, it wouldn't be a good look for Disneyland to just fire these experienced employees responsible for keeping everyone safe. But Mackenzie had it all thought out for their clients. The first step was transferring all of Disneyland's maintenance workers to the overnight graveyard shift. Then Disneyland could keep a much smaller, less experienced group that would handle mechanical breakdowns of rides during the day. But lots of people didn't agree with these changes. A former maintenance supervisor at the park said, "There's nothing wrong with saving money, but not at the expense of your prime objective, which is to keep the place running safely." But according to Mackenzie, that made no logical sense. Why should Disney keep paying people to check rides every day if none of them were breaking down? One employee who worked at Disneyland for 20 years put it plainly, "The reason they don't fail is because we check them every night." But Disneyland didn't listen. They were already on the hook for the giant bill Mackenzie was invoicing them. So they followed Mackenzie's advice. They fell for that consistency bias, where you want to keep doing things you already committed to even if it's stupid. And by 1997, there was a major cultural shift that focused on economics, being as lean an operation as possible to maximize profit at Disneyland. The message was do more with less. And the results were deadly.
So why would Disney work with a company like McKinsey that's worked for Microsoft, government agencies like the Department of Energy? Like, why would they do this? And it's to squeeze every last dollar from consumers, no matter the cost. And one thing that we all know Disney loves is money for their executives. They love money. And we all know that the root of all evil is the love of money. Now we'll shift the focus to the tragic consequences of this pursuit of profit. So check this out.
Christmas Eve 1998, 10:40 a.m. A man named Luan Dawson, his wife and their son were enjoying their morning at Disneyland when they decided to get on a ride called the Columbia, a vintage 84-foot ship that runs on an underwater track. Docking a ship of this size requires special training, but on this particular day, a supervisor with no experience filled in for an employee that was out sick. As the boat was hurtling towards the dock, she tied a rope to the middle hitch on the boats, but she did it way too soon. The power of the moving vessel tore the metal piece loose, which was unfortunately connected to a chunk of rotting wood. The boat's speed meant that chunk of wood and metal shattered with the force of an exploding bomb, sending fragments of debris flying through the air. The debris hit Luan Dawson first, killing him instantly. His wife, who was sitting next to him, was also severely disfigured from the blast, and it all happened right in front of their young son. The incident brought a lot of negative attention to Disneyland. The Dawson family's lawyer insisted that the accident happened because of Disneyland's cost-cutting efforts at the advice of Mackenzie. He said that Disneyland had fired all their ride leads, who were the highly paid safety experts that were assigned to each ride. This included the ride for the Columbia, not to mention all the experienced maintenance workers who had been switched over to the overnight shift, so none of them were around to help with problems throughout the day. Disneyland knew or should have known that making extensive cutbacks in their safety and maintenance programs would ultimately have devastating effects on the safety of the public, the family's lawyer said. But still, Disneyland refused to listen, and so that incident became the first of many. It had barely been a year, and Disneyland had already claimed its first life after Mackenzie came to town.
So Disney's relentless focus on profits has had a devastating effect on many people. Next, let's look into some of the more brutal and tragic incidents associated with these parks. So check this out.
A little over a year later, the Space Mountain roller coaster, one of the park's most popular rides, was taking a spin when one of its wheels suddenly got dislodged from the track. This jolted the ride to a sudden halt and badly injured 9 passengers in the process. When an investigation into the accident was conducted, they found, what do you know, poor maintenance to be the cause. It was only a couple of months earlier when Brandon Zucker had been crushed at that other ride. And even though the park swore that they cleaned up their acts, after so much tragedy in such a short time, the accidents kept coming. Summer 2003, Disneyland employees report a weird clicking noise coming from the Big Thunder Mountain roller coaster. Even after mechanics tried to fix the issue, the clicking noise continued. A note was put down that the roller coaster shouldn't be used until they figured out the issue. But it was used anyways. So on September 5th, 22-year-old Marcelo Torres and his friends got on the ride, completely oblivious to his history of mechanical problems. The train ride departed, and just as it went around a curve, the axle rod broke. The piece wedged itself between the track and the ride, pushing the first car over and crushing Marcelo Torres to death. 10 other riders were injured as well. When the state looked into the accident, they found that once again, it was due to poor maintenance and employee training issues. It was obvious that Disneyland was falling apart, and its parkgoers were paying the ultimate price. But who could be responsible? Well, there was one thing connecting all these fatal accidents: McKinsey and Company. But do you think McKinsey took responsibility for these accidents or got punished in any way? Nope. The Disney Corporation is still working with McKinsey as late as 2022.
And these are the untold stories of the tragic deaths, accidents that cast a shadow on Disney's sparkling reputation, and it's just sad. Finally, we'll be exploring the McKinsey effect, so check this out.
Before making this video, I actually talked to an ex-Disneyland employee, and she told me about all the measures they take to make sure no one sees anything bad happening at the happiest place on Earth. If a visitor is absolutely wasted, or if someone has a medical emergency or is too rowdy, there are hidden pathways alongside all the common areas with hidden doors, where Disneyland security will grab the person and take them out of sight as fast as possible, so nothing corrupts the other visitors' impression of Disneyland. So if they're that maniacal about maintaining their perfect image, it's no surprise that today, no one even knows or remembers these brutal deaths and accidents. Disneyland has managed to completely erase its dark history of deaths and injuries in the park. So what if they accidentally killed a bunch of people in the name of saving a dime? Who can stay mad at the happiest place on Earth? And as for McKinsey, they never faced any repercussions for providing this advice that led to these deaths. Nobody ever looked twice at McKinsey. And that is McKinsey's specialty. They offer advice that ruins the lives of millions, and yet they always walk away scot-free every single time. You see, Disneyland wasn't the only business that McKinsey turned into a death trap for profits. Nope. Just look at what happened when McKinsey consulted ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. McKinsey was brought in to help them figure out how to save money on illegal immigration. And McKinsey's recommendations were so cruel and inhumane that they even made ICE workers feel uncomfortable. McKinsey suggested that the government agency should cut their spending on food and medical care for detainees. They should just scale back the amount of food and medical care they provide, just like they did with ride maintenance at Disneyland. And it's just as disturbing as you can imagine.
Now, when they say that when somebody dies at Disneyland, they try to hide it and get you off real quick, I actually have a very special guest that knows a little bit more about that, and it's Opa. Opa died at Disneyland, but he was, thank God, revived. But not a lot of people know that. And Opa, what do you have to say about this topic?
Well, I still believe in Disneyland and their policies and etc. I mean, I do know that because they're a public corporation and they have lots of stockholders who want return on their investment and things like that, that they are more concerned with making sure they make their stock price go up and that they make the profits they need. But I think lately they've been a lot better at making sure that all their rides are safe and maintenance is done on them, and they do retain some of the older employees. Now in my case, it was not a ride that caused my problem.
Well, it could have been, because we did just go on a ride when we were on our way somewhere.
We had just finished watching Fantasmic, which is a river show, and we were going to go to, it was the park was about to close, and we were trying to hurry to go to Big Thunder Mountain to ride it one last time. And unfortunately, because I had ridden a bunch of rides, roller coaster rides, apparently it had caused a problem with my heart, and I had basically had a heart attack. And I mean, you know more than I do as far as how long I was out and all of the other details. So
yeah, well, I know that they swiftly took you out as quick as they could, and the way that they got us backstage kind of like raised an eyebrow with me, where I was like, this is weird how they have like 6 ambulances backstage is what they call it, but it's like in the park, but you can't see it. So they just try to hide all the things that could go wrong. Like they hide all the ambulances and all the paramedics and all that because they don't want you to see that and associate it with Disneyland. So it's just kind of a weird topic. So now it's time to laugh with a little bit of Norm Macdonald, and I hope you're ready to laugh. Check this out.
Are you still Canadian, or did you renounce that after 9/11?
What?
9/11, remember what happened?
You remember 9/11?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah, which one?
The one in 1911?
No, the one that where the
plane.
Where they took down the towers?
Yeah, all the stories came crashing down. You know, a lot like when we tried to write on the Norm Show. We couldn't. We tried to write stories and it all come crashing down.
You know, I'm old enough to remember back to simpler, more innocent times when the worst thing you'd hear about the news was hijacked jetliners flying into buildings.
Oh, now, Gilbert, you're going to get into trouble again. It takes forever, not forever, but it takes years of training to get a pilot's license. But it only takes a couple of minutes to steal a pilot's jacket and hat.
Fred Stoller. He's
and
been
then do
guest
some
on the show.
Terrorist act, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I was not living because I was thinking it was going to be a terrorist.
You were worried about a terrorist act.
I was a little nervous.
Did you see Olympus Has Fallen?
No.
Hey, for the 9th consecutive year, Nick, JetBlue Airlines ranked first for satisfaction among all North American airlines. But you know what ranked least in satisfaction? 9/11 Airlines. What a terrible name for an airline. It reminds me of that tragedy.
Oh, 9/11.
You know, oh, don't laugh at 9/11 again. 9/11. I tried to tell him not to laugh.
Adam.
I know. I walked through blood and bones in the streets of Manhattan trying to find my brother.
Jesus.
Yeah, he was in northern Canada. And you were the guy that was laughing and joking about it like only 4 weeks ago when I told you my story about walking ankle deep in blood and bone to try to find...
Well, that's different. That was kind of funny.
That does sound funny.
Right? I was in New York.
Blood and bone everywhere.
You
This is fine. This is fine for a fella that during 9/11, you know, was in Costa Rica partying with his friends. I was walking through the blood and the bones in.
So you were put off by that,
in Manhattan, a little bit.
I can't believe you're right.
And I had to get new pants because of the blood and the bones.
Just now or back then?
Back then, I was ankle deep in blood and bones.
You went through the war, Norm.
Well, it was an attack on our country. Do you want to hear my impression of the
It's going to be you if you don't lose weight.
Do you want to hear my impression of the 9/11 call from Johnny Carson?
911 call.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. But 9/11 was a national tragedy.
Yes, it was.
Why'd you laugh at that?
You said it.
Okay, Johnny Carson died at 80 years old. Would you like to hear my impression? Were you in New York when the Twin Towers fell?
No, I was in Los Angeles.
Well, either way, it was a national tragedy. It was.
Yeah, I know.
9/11.
Now, Norm was the king of setting people up. Jake, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I love Norm, and I think it's so funny how he uses situations people are not supposed to laugh at to get a humorous response. And what that does is it alleviates stress and pressure around that particular topic. So it kind of allows you to accentuate the outlandishness of some scenarios and some things that have happened in the world that were so out of the blue that they really caught society with a left hook. And so I think whenever you allow humor around a topic, it allows you to get to the core essential lesson from each situation. So I mean, I love that you include the humor section too, man. I needed that. You know, that was pretty fun.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's History's Mysteries, and that's all I got. So you got some memes for me, Jake?
Yeah, I got a couple. Here we go.
All right, meme me up. Meme me up.
So, don't forget to look at this picture. It's a exploding phone, and after that video I discussed earlier about the phones exploding, the cellular devices, the pagers exploding, we always have to be aware, you could be a walking phone. But anyways, here's something that you can apply to your life as a man who lacks purpose, distracts himself with pleasure. But a man with a goal, right, does what? He focuses and goes through the hard times and comes out on the other side. Just like a conversation between a flat earther and two people who believe two planes. Okay, sorry, let me try this again. Me trying to explain flat earth to people who believe two planes knocked down 3 buildings.
Hey, 9/11.
And so, some processes are worth the anguish to see the fruit on the other side. And so, same thing with, trudging through social media zombieism. This is somebody injecting social media and the things that it divvies out to us straight into their bloodstream. And that's kind of what we do, right? We doom scroll into our brain all of these concepts and indoctrinating stories and such. Just like something we've all seen in recent pop culture celebrity. Check this out. Will Smith and Johnny Depp are the reminders to all men that you can have good looks, have all the fame in the world, enough money to last 1,000 lives. But if you don't have a good wife as a life partner, your life will be miserable. If you found one, consider yourself a very rich man. So, having a partner that doesn't cause anguish like those gentlemen have experienced is the way to go. And that's why you need to find a good woman with a good head on her shoulders.
Yep.
On her shoulders. I am tongue-tied today. Check this out. Kinda wish I was a kid again so I could take a really long nap and everyone would be proud of me for it instead of disappointed, lol.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, here's one. Are you storing your cheese in the fridge? Experts say you should be leaving it on the counter. And this is what the expert looks like.
Haven't heard that one.
Oh. All right. Yeah, that's all for today. Just a couple.
All right, Jake, thank you for another great current news and memes as always. Opa, thank you for another great Opa's Corner. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode as a whole. Never quit fighting. Let no man deceive you. Stay awake, not woke. Subscribe and stay tuned. If you like what we do here on Skiba News Nation, please like and subscribe, and also share with others so that we can grow the biggest truth-seeking community on the internet. Huge shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this show without you, so I just wanted to say thank you. And if you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation.